Hello and welcome to our Bravo 22 live programme and YouTube channel, all made possible by the Royal British Legion and the Drive Project. My name is Kevin Whyte and I've been involved with Bravo 22 for a few months, partaking in the many fantastic art workshop events in person and online like we are today, such as lino cutting, painting with acrylics, puppetry and designing with watercolours, plus many more. If you're ex-military or connected to the military, please spread the word on the great work Bravo 22 do. And please subscribe to our YouTube channel and like and share our content on social media such as Facebook and Instagram. During today's session, you will be able to ask questions and comment via the live chat, and we'll endeavour to respond to those during the session. Keep an eye on the channel as there's loads more to come in the next few weeks. I'm now going to hand you over to Al Johnson, who is the Director of Art for Bravo 22 and also a great mentor to me as an aspiring artist. This is the first of Al's sessions of the Art Masterpiece series. So Al, take it away.
Thank you. How lovely. Lovely to be a mentor. Thank you very much. Lovely introduction, Kev. That's brilliant. So this is our Masterpiece series, new series, and we're going to look at paintings or sculptures that you think are masterpieces. Now, the whole thing of what is a masterpiece is a kind of interesting discussion, but what I want to look at is things that you think are really good, really interesting, or that you want to know more about. And hopefully you'll come up with some ideas and you can email into Alice. So for future sessions, we're going to be looking at things that you want to look at. So Kev, what have you got on a masterpiece in mind? Anything you'd like to know more about?
Yes, I was looking at various things this morning. And one that's really intrigued me is the Great Wave of Kanagawa. I hope I've pronounced that correctly. By Hokusai, is it?
Yeah.
Yes, I'd love to know more about that because I really do like the Oriental type art, such as their ink paintings and stuff like that. And I know that this is done with wood carving, wood block carving.
Yeah, like some people who saw Gilly's session will know a bit about wood cutting. So that's it. Yeah, that'd be a really good one. Anyway, if you've got ideas, you can send them into Alice, and we'll put them into future sessions. But today I've chosen a painting that I really like. It's by an artist called Hans Holbein, who was the court artist to Henry VIII, and the painting is called The Ambassadors, and it's image 1 we can see on our screens now. It's actually not called The Ambassadors, it's sort of known as The Ambassadors, but it's actually called by the names of the two men in it, Jean de Dintville and Georges de Selve. And Jean is the one in the sort of pink silk shirt on one side, and Georges is the man in much darker colours on the other side. And it's a double portrait, and a double portrait that's really very big. It's, let me see, probably a couple of meters wide, a couple of meters high. It's pretty, maybe more than that, maybe 3 meters. It's enormous. And so the people in it are life size. And the idea of a painting like this was to impress. You couldn't really have a portrait painted on this scale by an artist as important as Holbein. He was the king's artist. You couldn't have a portrait painted like that unless you were wealthy. You'd have to have serious money to pay for it. You used to pay, in fact, for a portrait on the basis of how much body it had in it. So if you didn't have much money, you could just have a head, a little bit of your, just the head section. If it was a bit bigger, you could have a head and shoulders, or down to your waist, maybe. So that was known as a half length. A full length portrait would cost more. And a double portrait, and this is a double portrait with other objects, that would be very, very expensive. So we're looking at a very, very expensive painting. Not just now, now it would cost millions, but at the time it would have been very expensive to commission. So the two men in it, Jean de Dintville and Georges de Selve, are not both ambassadors. Only Jean isn't an ambassador. and you can tell by the names they're French. Jean is the French ambassador to in England at the time, so he was negotiating between Francis, the King of France, and Henry, the King of England. And Henry, we'll come on to it in a bit, but Henry was not impressed with Catholic rule, and he really wanted it. He wanted to get married again, so he kind of overthrew the whole religious status at the time. But let's just have a look at the painting itself. So on one side, you've got this very flamboyant Jean in his pink shirt and his fur-lined jacket, and he's holding a dagger. If we look at image 2, we can see the dagger in his hand. And I don't know if you'll be able to see without seeing the real painting, which is in the National Gallery. I've put a link onto the YouTube channel to the National Gallery site, so to this painting. And actually, you can do quite a good thing. You can zoom in on different aspects of the painting. So all the paintings in the National Gallery site, you can do that. So it's good for looking at details. If we look at image 2, we can see the dagger in Jean's hand, and you can see the end of his pink sleeve and that gold dagger and the tassel behind it, all beautifully painted. And on the dagger, it says his age, which is actually unexpected, really, because he's only 29. He's quite a young man. And his friend, Georges, is only 26, and his age is written on the Bible. If we go back to the image 1 again. So quite young men, very, very important. They've both got lots of money, lots of prestige. I suppose people died much younger, and people matured younger, I suppose. But even so, these were wealthy young men. And they were being painted because Georges was visiting England, and Jean decided to have a portrait painted of the two of them. Jean thought England was awful, actually. He hated it. He loved being in France. He had a chateau in France that he was having done up, and he wanted to really be in his chateau, but he was sent by the king to try and sort of investigate what was going on in England. He thought England was grey and foggy. And he said he was splenetic, which means someone who's bilious, whose spleen is overdoing it. Sour, it means sour. He felt sour in England. He didn't like it at all. So when his friend came, he thought, well, we'll have a portrait painted and show off in the portrait. Kevin, they're very dressed up in this portrait, aren't they? I mean, they're wearing furs and fur-lined coats. Actually, Jean is wearing this extraordinary sort of pink satin outfit with a black velvet gown over it. Furs, of course, were a sign of great wealth at the time. You wore your fur on the inside, of course, not on the outside, like what we do now. If you've got fur, you show it off. But in those days, you wore it on the inside. You just had little glimpses. Kevin, what would you wear if you were dressing up for your portrait?
I'd wear a nice 3-piece suit, I think. So it's something that you're not going to do it more than once or twice maybe in your life, are you? So you want to look at your best. So you're going to wear something nice. You're not just going to turn up in a pair of shorts and t-shirt, I wouldn't imagine.
Do you think they dressed up for the portrait?
Oh, I definitely think they've dressed up. I mean, back in those days, men of power as they were, I dare say they wore quite nice, extravagant things anyway. But I also believe that if you want something that's going to be seen by loads of people all the time, you want to project yourself in the best light possible. So it's all going to be about extravagance and
excess.
Yeah, and I suppose it's like the equivalent to nowadays is people posting their lives on Instagram. They want to project their best version of themselves. And I think this is kind of like the medieval version of that.
It's an interesting thing, isn't it? Because nowadays we can have so many images.
Yeah.
Even very, very wealthy young men like this would have had very few images of themselves because a painting was so expensive. Whereas if you're taking photographs, you can take loads and loads of photographs, can't you?
Yeah.
So the sort of intention with the painting is to show off, is to show status, to show their interests, and we'll come on to some of those objects in a moment. But also to just to show off to the world how much money you've got. You know, so there are not so many ways of doing that nowadays, I think. How would you show you got loads and loads of money, do you think, if you had?
If I had,
you may be very rich, Kevin, for all I know.
I think I'd probably have items on display, you know. So you like the guy, like the actual ambassador there. He's got that's probably his chain of office, I'm guessing. That's around his neck. But you would put your best suit on, and you try and make it look like that people would know that you've got your best attire on, you know. And little items in the background, sometimes subtle. You know, you might have I don't know, a nice car in the background, or a specific guitar or something like that, just so that people know, oh, that guy's got such and such, and he's got this, and he must have quite a bit of money to be able to afford those things.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. There's some of the symbols are more subtle than we can, you know, people at the time would have been able to read them as symbols of wealth. Have we got any questions coming in?
We've got one comment so far, and it's from Alice, and she remembers going around Holyrood House in Edinburgh, and when it came to the gallery, it said that most paintings of those days, they were pretty much all painted in the same face. Is this true? And that question's come from Graham.
It's not true of Holbein, actually. Holbein was an extraordinary painter. Prior to this, so if you go back a bit further into the 15th and 16th centuries, 14th and 15th centuries, you get a sort of generic face, they're all much the same. By this time, and certainly by in Holbein's paintings, they're much more personal. It's thought that he met Jean, but the painter Georges, from stories or recollections, or that he made very quick drawings. But we do know that he did get incredible likenesses, and the reason we know that is because in the Royal Collection, so this is the Queen's collection of paintings, which is absolutely vast, amazing collection. There are 80 drawings of people in the court by Holbein, people in court, that he was, you know, preparation for paintings, later paintings, and they're absolutely extraordinary. And sometimes the paintings are less like the people than the drawings, because he sort of, you know, perhaps people would say, I don't want so many chins, or can you make me look a bit thinner? Okay, let's go on to the objects. So we've got these very, very wealthy young men. And then there's a table in the middle, a sort of, it's actually called a sideboard. Sideboards used to be used in the dining hall for very wealthy people, obviously, and it would be where you'd have the swan, you know, the sort of decorated swan, or the pig, you know, the spit roasted pig. So showing off the food for the for your guests. But in this case, there's a series of objects on this sideboard. If we look at image number 3, you can see that this is a carpet, and actually the top of the sideboard is covered in a carpet, and the carpet is a turkey, known as a turkey carpet, and they became so famous that, I mean, they were imported from Turkey, which is why they're called turkey carpets, obviously, and they were handmade. They're very, very, very expensive, and they became incredibly famous because Holbein painted them so often in his pictures. And the carpet on the painting is absolutely extraordinary. It's so beautifully decorated, and you have this sense that if you touched it, it would be textured like a carpet. But of course, it's just paint. So the reason it's on the side. So if we go back to image 1 again, the reason it's on the sideboard, not on the floor, is because you would never put a carpet on the floor at that time. They were so precious that it becomes a symbol of great wealth if somebody's treading on a carpet. So there are some paintings of monarchs, and there's one of Henry VIII. There's several paintings of Elizabeth I where they're treading on a carpet, little tiny carpets, usually not room size, but little mats, and that's to show their incredible wealth. If we're looking again at image 1, on that top layer of objects, there's a very peculiar object, and I'm going to ask you, see if anyone can figure this out. If we have a look at, on the top layer, there's a sort of squarish object. If we look at image 5, we can see that object in more detail. I want you to guess, see if any of our viewers can guess what it is. So I'm going to come back to that in a minute. So just have a look at that for a minute and see if you can work out what it is. And we'll come back in a minute. If we go back to the main painting again, image 1, you've got various other objects there. Anything you can recognise, Kev, from those objects?
Well, there's a globe.
Yeah.
In the background, and looks like a scroll just by a scroll tube, I think.
Yeah.
And there's definitely either a sundial or some sort of navigational aid, I think. Definitely. There's a couple of books, but you can't tell what they are. One of the guys is leaning on one of the books.
Yeah, very, very good. Actually, there's you make instruments, don't you, Kevin? And there's a lute at the bottom.
Yeah, there's a nice lute at the bottom there, and another globe. A few more books, and I think I'm not sure what those. There's some like cylindrical objects, some like tubes down the bottom. Look like they've got brass ends or something like that, and I don't know whether they're telescopes or whether they.
No, they're flutes, actually.
Ah, flutes.
Flutes. Yeah. And there's one missing, and this painting is full of things that are not quite as they should be, actually. So one of the flutes is missing. The lute has got a broken string. So there are sort of slight shifts in what you would expect. The two globes are interesting because the one at the bottom, if we have a look at image 4, the one at on the lower shelf is a terrestrial globe, and it shows France. I don't know if you can recognise it from that image, but you can see Africa, the top of Africa, and then you can see Europe. That sort of brown shape is Europe, and then a quite misshapen United Kingdom, and the men have come from Polyhedral in France, so it shows their hometown. That's the point of the globe. And remember that a globe is a very new idea because it's only, I don't know, 50 years since it was discovered that the world was not actually flat, that it was a sphere, because people had only started traveling as far enough to realize that the world was a sphere. So the globes are quite important. The one on the top shelf is a celestial globe, so that's the globe of the stars, and the astronomy and astrology were very important at the time. It was very highly regarded as ways, telling the future, but also navigation. And you're right, a lot of those objects on the top shelf are navigational instruments to help people move around, obviously long before satellites, so to move around at sea. And most travel was by sea, obviously long before aeroplanes. So navigational instruments are very, very important. Now, should we go back to our, the book, by the way, is an arithmetic book. Just to sound very thrilling. There's also a music book there. Should we go back to image 5? Have we got any answers about this?
Yeah, I've got a couple of comments. One for you to ponder from Kate is what constitutes a masterpiece, and I've got a few comments. One from Mick Carroll. What is the thing between them on the floor? It looks like a squashed skull.
We're coming to that.
Square object. Yeah, the square object that we were talking about. Sarah has guessed that it's some form of an early compass.
Right.
Sally Ann's guess is a clock. And Sally also asked if the instrument was a mandolin, but obviously you've already mentioned that was a lute. And Mick has made a comment saying that we've got science on the top and art at the bottom. So yeah,
cool. That's very well spotted, actually. Science and art at this time, in fact, they were all regarded as what we now think of as the creative arts. There wasn't the division between science and mathematics and visual arts that there is now. It was much more cohesive. So, but you're right that the top layer is the navigational instruments, and the bottom layer is the musical instruments and the music books. But then the arithmetic book is also on the bottom layer, and that's that would have been much more integrated. It would have all been seen as being a form of the arts, a form of learning, about scholarship. I mean, only very, very wealthy people were educated at this time. And another thing that they're doing here is showing off their education. They probably only 7% of people were educated at this time, went to school. As you get on in the centuries, it's only really the Education Act in the 19th century that gets people into education generally. So most people can't read, most people are uneducated. So these young men are showing their wealth, they're showing their status, they're showing their significance in the world, they're showing their learning. It's a real show-off painting. So somebody said a clock. Who was that? Sally Ann. That's the closest. It is a sundial, which is a form of clock. It was known as a polyhedral sundial. And all of those objects at the top were the very latest in science and technology at the time. Very interesting, the way that their knowledge has been kind of added into the painting. Now, somebody's mentioned the object at the bottom. Mick Carroll?
It was.
You're absolutely right. It is a skull. It is a squash skull. It's a very strange object. Shall we have a look at image 6, which shows that in more detail? It's a kind of, it's not so much squashed, just stretched, I suppose. It's kind of pulled right out. And this kind of image, now on a computer, you can do this quite easily. Well, some people can. People who've grasped Photoshop can do this. But of course, at the time, to make a stretched out object would have been extremely difficult. You would have had to have a set of mirrors and a very good imagination. And I think there's been lots of discussions about how this was done over the centuries. People have written whole books on this, how this skull was stretched out. I think the thing to remember is that however it was done, whatever tricks were used, you still had to be a very good painter. It's known as an anamorphic projection. So it's a kind of a way of painting something that doesn't look right from one position, but actually does look right from another position. When you look at the painting, the skull is sort of, it should be hung so that the skull is just below eye level. So it should be hung fairly high. Paintings were in those days. And in the National Gallery, you can go to the side of the painting and look at the skull. And what you see is image 7. So if we look at image 7, we can see the skull kind of popping back into shape. And something very peculiar happens actually, because if you look at the stretched skull from the front, you can't see quite what it is. You can work out it's a skull, but you can't work out quite why. If you look at it from the side, you can see the skull, but you can't see the rest of the painting. The painting sort of disappears. And there are lots of ideas about why that was. To do with religious ideas, I suppose. Now, to put a skull in a painting is not in itself particularly weird. There were loads of paintings with skulls in them. And references to skulls, like Yorick holding the skull in Shakespeare. But if he put a skull on the sideboard, that would have been actually quite sensible. Why does he stretch out the skull? Because the skull references death, of course. And that's what it is, the memento mori, the reminder of death. And that was very current as thinking at the time. And actually, if we go back to the main image again, to image 1, in the top corner, the top left corner, let me find my image. In the top left corner, you can see there's that green curtain, the damask curtain, beautiful material. That was a very recent discovery, the production of damask, so hugely expensive. In the top left corner, the curtain is slightly pulled back and you can see a silvery object in that corner, and that's a crucifix. So what I think Holbein is doing is referring to religious belief. Now, this is the year that Henry VIII parts company with the Catholics, because he doesn't want to be married to Catherine of Aragon anymore. He wants to marry Anne Boleyn. And he can't divorce Catherine of Aragon because of the Catholic disbelief in divorce. So in order to divorce her, he has to break with the church altogether. So that's what he does. The Pope won't divorce him. So he says, right, well, that's it. I'll break with the church. I'll set up the Church of England. This is the beginning of the Church of England, so that he can marry Anne Boleyn. And I think what Holbein is doing is kind of going, yeah, but it's all the same religion, he's trying to be careful, really. So he's saying life in the middle, life is these young men with their futures before them. The skull is the reference to death, the reminder of death. And the crucifix is life after death, the Christian belief of life after death, of resurrection. So it's a very complicated painting, a lot of ideas in there, actually, lots of different systems of storytelling going on. Right, have we got any more questions, Kevin? Because
just got a comment saying that the painting seems to be depicting wealth and intelligence and privilege. That's come from Sally. Yeah. And Mick said that the skull looks like it's been badly photoshopped, but I think Photoshop
wasn't available to Holbein at the time.
I think, like you said, it's an optical illusion.
Yes, it is. It's a very clever system. I mean, why did he do this? Kevin, you've turned round, by the way. One of the things that I think has happened with this, or one of the ideas behind the painting, is that the skull is not on the table, because Holbein wants to prove what a good artist he is. He's painted this extraordinary portrait, but maybe they asked Holbein to come up with some new thing, something no one had ever done before, and it hadn't been done before and hasn't really been done much since. It's an incredibly complicated thing to do. I just want to remind you, I think we seem to have lost Kevin, so I'm going to say goodbye to you. I just want to remind you to think about these objects, and I want you to set up a challenge for you. So write a list. I mean, it's just a list this time. Write a list of the objects that you would like in your painting, if you have a portrait painted, and tell us what you would like. So what would you wear, and what objects you would have, to tell us more about you. So just try and imagine yourself into a portrait, and see what you would like to wear and to have around you. So thank you very, very much for watching. Don't forget also to send in your masterpiece ideas to Alice, so that we can develop our series of masterpiece talks. Thank you very much for watching. Wonderful to be with you again. Lots of new things coming up next week. We'll put together a list of in the newsletter of the things that are coming up. Take care. Bye bye.